Oh, heresies. Fresca. Fresca is
That's it.
heresy.
I'm out of this stream.
Sorry, I've had Fresca and I'm like, why is this in a 7-Eleven? This tastes like piss.
I know it should be in a fancy bottle. It is.
No, piss does not belong in a fancy bottle.
Fresca is amazing. If you know, you know.
I don't know. I've tried it several times, and no, I don't know it. I refuse to know it, like Mary Magdalene. Speaking of Mary Magdalene, we're going to be talking about characters of faith. That was a segue.
Segue.
I tried. The reason why I wanted to talk about characters of faith was twofold. One is I actually love discussing how do people get into playing these types of characters. And we've never addressed it before. And how-tos are always just so popular because it requires going into a particular mindset in order to play a character. And what's lovely about the both of you, Dylan and Vivka, is that you play such archetypical spiritual characters, and yet you're very atypical. And I can't really say that about a lot of characters. So let's start off with Dylan, and let's have you describe the character concept behind Walter Dolan.
So Walter Dolan is a priest of the Church of Telling Visions. If you're unfamiliar with the faith in the setting, it's a post-apocalypse setting, so the faith is kind of a cargo cult, misunderstanding people talking about television broadcasts and misconstruing that as the literal voice of God. So my character is kind of a subsect of that conceptually, was descended from basically Disneyland annual pass holders, and hails Mickey Mouse as the chosen son of their Lord and Savior, Walter, the animator.
Nice.
I'm kind of wandering now, but yeah.
No, that was great. Vivka, talk about a little bit about Chance.
So Chance is, as I said, she's a half fae. She's a bird person, essentially. Like, I have this big beak, and she's dressed in she's a trash bird. She's dressed in like rags and everything. And much to everyone's surprise, including my own, I am a Grandmaster Druid of my faith, which has been a wild ride because literally, the last time I was on Life Action Roleplay, we discussed it. I found religion with Ryan in game because. You were saying that a how-to is so interesting. I never intended Chance to be religious at all. So to see how far she's come, Old Ways is it kind of has like a pantheon of different gods, and I pray to Crow, which she's a crow, so that kind of works out. But yeah, it's her entire history with that religion and building it up has been really just interesting and unique and unexpected for me, the player, as much as anyone else.
I have to say, what I'm very happy about is that I've had wonderful faith-based role-playing experiences with both of you. Like with you, Vivka, like the role play between Sicario and Chance, just off of a random thing of we're mourners. Let's help them mourn the dead, and just straight improving all of that was probably one of the best role play experiences I've had in Twin Mask.
I still completely agree. We wrecked those NPCs. There was not a dry eye in the house.
Yeah. And then with Dylan, I love that Marion Tenda, it's like that you're his mentor. So we get to have like these awesome conversations about being telling visionists and how do you deal with faith and how do you have these lessons. in the midst of trying to save the town. So it's awesome. I love that I get to call you my mentor in that regard, especially since you taught me so much about how faith works in Dystopia Rising. So you are my mentor in and out of character in that regard.
Yeah, because your character in Dystopia Rising, Ryan, is I don't think we've mentioned it this episode, have we?
No, like we haven't talked about Marion Tendo is also a telling visionist.
I wonder who they worship.
Uh,
With a
little
name
complicated.
like that.
I know. Little complicated.
The one great Yoshi.
The one great. I've called it the path of the invincible star. One aspect that's always super interesting about playing a spiritual figure is costuming. And I know, Dylan, for your character, you have very particular costuming based off of the lesson that you plan to teach. Can you talk more about that?
Well, the way Walter dresses is as a deeply religious person, everything he wears is kind of symbolic and expressive of faith in some way. But also, I just like to have fun of it because he's straight up wearing Mickey Mouse pants.
Could you perhaps give us a couple of examples of like pieces of clothing that you feel represent certain things, if any come to mind?
So, his hair is basically Captain Jack Sparrow wig. That a lot of my concept with this character is originally like, what would be a really dumb joke to have in game, but then like slowly evolves into some intense spiritual significance. So this hairstyle is something that's like was found on the ancient relics of Disneyland and was passed down through the generations as a traditional hairstyle signifying one of spiritualness. And then like he's got all the beads in his hair, but like some of the beads have special significance, like a totem that's shaped like Mickey Mouse's face. There's one of the beads is straight up a Death Star.
That must be a very satisfying tie-in now with the acquisition and everything.
Vivka, same question. Like, how do you reflect costuming or spirituality in your costuming?
Well, with Chance, it's not just faith, it's also like who she is as a crow person. I mean, being a crow, the shinies. Oh my God, the shinies. And people know that and they bring stuff to me. So literally my costume just keeps getting heavier and heavier because every single time someone gives me anything, I keep it forever. My belt in game is probably 25 pounds at this point because it's literally covered in keys and rings and coins, and I have 18 pockets and all of them are overflowing with pearls and crystals and rocks and all of this stuff that people have given me. But interspersed in all of those are what I consider to be really important. Anyone else would look at these things and they'd think they trash, but for me, these are really important spiritual, significant pieces. Like, for example, we had a really big event at game, and this was when I was first just like going along my way, druid in training. And I ran over to the altar and I started praying to Crow, and someone was praying next to me and they were like, "You're a follower of Crow, right?" And I was like, "No, what gave it away?" Because I have a giant beak. And he's like, "I heard that crows like shinies," and he gave me like this gold coin that has a little dragon on it. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll definitely give that to him, thank you." And so I took that, and that was the first time. It just so happened that was the first time praying with that coin that Crow actually spoke to me. I've had that coin in my pocket and I pull it out and I play with it in my fingers during pretty much all of my initiations or any of my speakings with the underlings. And I've had that coin for over a year now, just constantly playing with it. When I was on my path to becoming an actual druid, my mentor in game gave me a little acorn, and he told me that I need to plant this acorn, and as it grows, I will grow with it. And when that acorn becomes a tree, I will then become a druid. To which I laughed and I was like, okay, I'm half fae. That's like, you know, you're going to die. You're a human. You only live like what, like 20, 30 years. I have no idea. I'm half fae. I live like forever, but okay. But I still have that acorn on me. So for Chance, it's a lot more the subtleties. And for my character Mercy, her faith is her entire being. So I am just decked head to toe with rosaries and crosses and everything, because that's like the entire pinnacle of her life. That's it.
We do have a question out from the audience from Pagsy the Crabsy. And the question is, Dylan and Vivka, what are your favorite ways to engage other PCs in your faith roleplay? And what would you recommend for others to do this, trying to do the same? So, for example, sermons, demonstrations, feasts, etc. Let's start off with Dylan.
I mean, I like my sermons. That's kind of become a benchmark part of my religious character, is monthly just going out and ranting for half an hour about how Mickey Mouse is God. But
Dylan, if you wouldn't mind, could you share with our listeners what exactly your sermon, like the event that your sermon is called?
Oh, yes. Everyone, all TVs know that the most hallowed time of the week is Saturday mornings. It is our Sabbath. So, of course, we celebrate Saturday morning cartoons every month. But the way I treat my sermons as a player putting it together is more trying to do some kind of weird entertainment show rather than a sermon, which kind of works out for my character and for the faith, because the faith is all about the razzle dazzle and telling stories to spread the word of God. But I find that if you try and focus on making things entertaining, that just makes not only the gameplay a lot more engaging for other people to interact with, but also makes it a lot easier to talk religion without it being really awkward and just, I guess, accurately LARPing the feeling of people knocking on your door with pamphlets.
That's super good.
Yeah.
Like having a way of delivering your faith without it seeming like you're actually like trying to force it on people. When it comes to, like, this is all a game, this is all a LARP, so things should be fun and enjoyable for everyone involved. And I've in a little bit, I'll touch on a couple of my theories or thoughts on that. Dylan, are you all done with your suggestions and your recommendations and things like that, or?
I guess stick to the kinds of things that interest you outside of game and outside of this fake religion that you're playing, and try and play to your strengths and incorporate that in. I like to play with hymns, which are just basically cartoon theme songs. But yeah, you do you.
Cool. And Vivka?
So I was thinking about this, and like I feel very similar. Like, I don't want to be a player that, as Dylan so perfectly put it, is knocking on people's tent doors, being like, "Hello, have you heard the good word of the crow today?" So I kind of I'm more of a reactionary player. I put out there, especially with new players, that if they are interested in learning about old ways, to come and find me and to talk with me about it. And that I found is a really good way to not only give an opening for a conversation about it, in which I know that it's in a welcome space, but also to give new players almost like a quest, like, because like I said, I'm fumbling around in DR being like, who do I talk to get into this this sweet religion? So I try to make that easier for the new players in Twin Mask to be like, hey, find the freaking beak. But my absolute favorite religious like interaction would by far be initiations into the religion. I looked around to how a lot of the other druids do it, and again in Twin Mass, there's an entire pantheon of different gods, and each one encompasses like their own kind of like element and feeling and vibe. And so like I know a druid who prays to Stag, and Stag is feasting, and so when he does initiations, it's a lot of like food and sharing and taking into your body. And then I know someone else who does the grandiose, like the yelling and the screaming and the bow down to this god, and it's really over the top. Now for me, what I like, I've done quite a few and I absolutely love them. I have someone come to me and I only do my initiations one-on-one. Honestly, it takes 20 minutes to a half hour, but we go into a corner and I do what I love best, which is just a complete theater of the mind. And in game, I'm like, here, take these mushrooms. And come on the quest with me. But I more just explain to them, I essentially take them through their memories, which is really great because that way they're interacting and giving me more information about them for me to play with. But I go through their memories and I essentially implant moments where their god was there, kind of like that, there were two footprints in the sand and then there was one that was carrying you. I kind of do that, only like not so live, laugh, love. And I implant that throughout their memories so that when we wake up from essentially this seance, this ritual, they have a deeper kind of connection, I hope, than they had before. And apparently all I want to do is make people cry in games. And that really is a great way to do it, is to really to pull on all their heartstrings.
I have played in Vampire LARPs a long time ago, a Catholic priest by the name of Father Balthazar, and I played that Toreador for 2 to 3 years, and my favorite faith role play was Confessions, because and not necessarily confessions of sin, but often we're dealing with vampires who are struggling with their humanity. So often we're dealing with those characters who now have an outlet to have some private role play and talk about, I'm struggling with constantly drinking blood out of people, being a literal parasite, and trying to exist. Or is there a hereafter? Or do we actually all go to hell? Like, what is actually there for us? So much of that role play just comes as a result of me being in a black Cossack and traditional cross, angelic cross around my neck. So it's almost like, because I'm dressed like an old-fashioned priest, that it invites that kind of role play. However, I also just enjoy that private time with those characters, because it's with those characters, they don't get to role play that aspect with anyone else. So for me, it's really special role play to have, and it's almost addictive to be able to play a character of faith because of that.
Yes.
Yeah, thinking back, all my favorite religious role play is just one-on-one talking about like, okay, so what's your character going through and why do they want to talk about faith? Because like I want to try and dial in how I can give some really freaking dramatic revelation to you based off of what you're going through right now.
It's kind of like in Dystopia Rising, when you die, you have these sequences called Gravemind sequences before you might come back alive, potentially, or not, depends. But while those things go on, I love to do deep dives inside the psyche of a character. And that does involve a little bit of out of character discussion beforehand. But it's a lot of like kind of, poking, prodding, encouraging, and shoving of like different aspects. And basically just trying to every once in a while check in on the character's emotional range. Like in an online LARP that I helped run recently, we had a lot of planned character death because it was intentionally a one shot. And someone had like a very epic death, and as they're bleeding out, and like they are dead, at least in terms of the mechanics of the game, I ask them, what are the last things that your character is thinking about? And very clearly, the player started crying because of that. In a good way, they started talking about the people who were important to that character, that were friends that they were playing with. And it really kind of, like bridged that gap and tapped in, and it made it that, nice bleed effect. So yeah, like any moments where you can kind of get those unique conversations that players don't usually get to share, I think is a huge boon to role-playing in general, in any kind of way that you can really get it. And I'm glad that Faith is such a way that it sounds like all three of you have been able to tap people on.
Something I just remembered I do in like specifically that vein is my character has this rune casting set that I made. These are some of the quote unquote runes I have, but they're just buttons off a VCR player. The whole system is just something I made up and just kind of BS my way through every session. But every time I've done it, it kind of uncovers these character paths that I definitely was never aware of. And I feel like the players that I'm interacting with hadn't put much thought into until it came up in this conversation. And it suddenly gives them this profound thing to work with from that point on.
That is the goal always, I think. If you can give a player a new prompt to kind of consider, one of the reasons why I like the Gravemind sequences so much is because often a player comes in not really knowing what to expect, and absolutely not having all of the answers for their own backstory. And when you get to actually ask them, what are you thinking right now? Why is that important to you? And so forth. And like, if they're really set on a particular thing, it's like, why are you like this? But not in like a teasing or joking kind of way. In a genuine, like, what brought you to hate insert thing, like insert that thing that character hates. And if the player doesn't really have that much of an answer, they almost always start to develop those while they're in there with you doing that kind of stuff. The best way of forming a character is to brainstorm and ask someone a whole bunch of questions, force someone to answer questions you're asking, and that helps them kind of flesh out this character. And I think that same stance can be done when you're thinking about how your character internalizes a faith. There's a lot of different ways that faith exist potentially in LARP, be it much more active of gods getting involved in kind of like, like support me, I will give you power, or like don't do that because I will throw a lightning bolt at you. Or then you start looking at some of the other systems which are more kind of silent deity, requiring actual faith, where you don't know, so you have to take it on faith that they exist, or it's more philosophical based. Ryan, did you have something to say?
No, I didn't have, I was only looking at the next question. So if you want to continue, go ahead. I was going to ask the next question.
I thought yeah. Okay. But yeah, all of these different types of faiths, depending on how your character kind of internalizes them or like kind of consumes them, And I mean that more in an idea of like consuming food to live. Like if faith is really important to your character, you should make it really damn important to your character. If you want to follow a faith, then you should always try to turn it up a notch past what you think you should do. Because the other flip side of that is if you kind of like milk toast it and just kind of half-ass your faith, even if you intended your character to have a strong belief in something, if you haven't really planned out anything, you don't have any ammo to really get behind and, you know, kind of keep that faith cart rolling. And I'm absolutely guilty of coming into some games where I'm like, oh yeah, I follow this faith, but I didn't think about it. And it very quickly turned into this case of my character being more like maybe fair weather follower, like only really need, like calls on it when they need it. And they don't really fully believe it. It's more like they were raised to follow the faith, but they don't actually believe in the faith. And I think the difference between those two types of ways of following a faith should be a conscious choice that you as a player makes, because it is so important and it really changes the whole tone of your character. So I think that's a really important thing to consider if you're planning on being a player of, or planning on playing a character of faith. How actually into their faith are they? But we do have a question.
Oh, I did want to address one thing. There is one thing though. There are many times when a person plays a character of faith, not because they are faithful, but that's because the culture and the game has mechanics that make things advantageous to play such a character, and a faith is espoused into those mechanics. So the end result is what you're doing is you're almost playing, I don't know what the right word is, but you're essentially playing like a deacon or a vicar, or like essentially a layman of the faith, because it is advantageous to do so. For, you know, a clear example in Dystopia Rising is Call the Almighty, which is a mechanic that when you call on this, it restores all of your hit points as well as like all of your limbs and such. I remember very early on playing Mario Nintendo, people who were not from, who I didn't meet, asked me if I had this, and I was such a young player, and I said no, and then they immediately went away, and I'm like, I don't know what I did.
They were looking for fast healing. That's what
they were about
looking
looking for fast healing. So it's something to like consider, that not everybody who plays a character of faith plays one because they are looking for faith-based roleplay. Sometimes they're looking at it as an advantage, and maybe might come into their own understanding of faith from doing so, but that takes some emotional and role-playing maturity, really, on the part of the player.
You think?
Sorry?
Go ahead, Dylan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So, funny story, I was playing my priest for like 3 years before I learned Call the Almighty, and Call the Almighty in that game is kind of considered just a standard thing because it's so dang practical in the system. So, like, pretty much every priest is going to learn that, if not took up the priest profession just to learn that.
Yeah.
And then by the time I did learn Call the Almighty, I made a point of never using it because I never intended to play a priest. It just kind of happened by role play. So I wanted to keep that purity of just like, is an actual priest by ideal and not by mechanical effect.
I think
we were
go
talking
ahead,
about
Vivka.
like essentially like spells and mechanics in the game that kind of hype up like a religion thing. I mean, Twin Mass just had this huge like religion tree put in that totally changed everything about how religion is handled in the game. I mean, now I feel like druids are no longer like a niche little thing that's really based on like the role play. It's can also just be like this huge like power grab. power grab is the wrong word. Like it's just a mechanical push. But I remember for me, like for Chance, like I said, she's kind of understated with her religion in that she doesn't really talk about it unless you poke her about it, and then she'll never shut up. But you do have to give her that poke. And looking like such a scrappy, dingy little trash bird, no one really thinks that I have any kind of real power, or that I have any kind of like actual like influence or place of standing. So I remember I missed a game of Twin Mask, and then came back, and a couple people were essentially like talking about, you know, the new elements of like grand druids and everything. And I remember I was like kind of crawling around and everything. And I was like, what? That? Oh yeah, I'm that. And they're like, wait, what? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm a grand druid. I got two mysticism and this other thing. Oh, I can do this other thing too. You know, I can actually also do this other thing. And I just started like listing all this stuff. And I had no idea, but I was actually like, during that game, probably one of the strongest druids in the entire game. And everyone's just like, where did this come from? And literally, like, I had saved all of the bonus, like all of the character creation points and everything. I had just been banking them, and I just bought everything in a go. So I had to think of some reason of why I was suddenly like, oh, superpowered. So I was knowing Chance, I was just like, oh yeah, you know, last gathering when I wasn't really here, yeah, I got lost in the woods, ate a lot of mushrooms, really saw some stuff, really connected with some gods, you know what I'm saying? But now I've seen some shit.
Amazing.
I just came out and I have like all these like super god powers, and it's just like, oopsie. Okay.
Now, Ryan, you say about like, you know, the idea of some people picking faith powers. If faith in a game has a mechanical advantage, there are absolutely always going to be power gamers or wacky bat players, or however you want to coin the term. But there are people who will choose something not because of the role play potential, but because of the I want to swing higher numbers or be more powerful in combat kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I mean, almost every guest that we have on our show is much more like leaning into the idea that that one time where you hit the bad guy for a very high number and then they fell over wasn't really that memorable, because it's more, why are you doing that? What's going to happen afterwards? Like the motivations and the consequences I find are far more exciting, and the senses of purpose and stuff that you can get in LARPs are really what makes LARP such a memorable experience. I do enjoy fighting, but honestly, I struggle to remember times where I have felt like it's been a highlight of my game. Almost always, my highlights of my game are just good roleplay experiences, having a quiet talk with someone in the middle of the night, or learning something really cool about a character, or things like that. So while yes, some people do play more for the mechanical side of I want to swing powers, I would always encourage people, you might not know what you're missing. If you invest in the faith, you might turn out to have something that you're actually really enjoying. And the coolest moment, I think, in playing a character is when you have a good enough idea of what kind of person they are, be it through like their current identity or their backstory, their beliefs, or what have you, that you're not so much making choices for your character as you are doing what makes sense for your character, in which case your character has gone to that point where they are, to a certain degree, a living, breathing creature. They have their own goals and ideals and thoughts and phobias. And the more that you acclimate yourself to what is important for that character, the more you will start to act like that character. And that is in the true essence of role playing. And I will always encourage someone that is being a little bit more of a power gamer player to try embracing that side of their character and see how they can pan it out.
One thing,
just really fast.
Yeah.
I just said that, I just rolled in with all these like superpowers and everything. Everything that I chose is just something that's useful if a group of people need me. None of them are like, swinging big. And I honestly could not agree more with what Kai said, because I think back to all of like the super incredible, amazing moments, like the character changing, the moments that you bring home afterwards and you're thinking about all week. And it's literally just, initiations where, again, like throwing back where I helped someone build their backstory because I was like, tell me about your death, like your first death. Well, what were you seeing when you closed your eyes? What was the last thing you saw? What did you smell as you started to slip away? And these are questions that they never thought of. And you're able to like have these quiet talks where they walk away with something brand new about themselves, and those moments, just these incredible introspective moments that religious role play is able to give you is so much more rewarding than like my sword swings light and it hits hard.
Absolutely. Character depth is the thing. Ryan, you look like you had something to say.
Oh, I was gonna just ask a question from chat.
Hell yeah.
So we have a question from Carrie Kingdom. Have you found that your character's strong religious beliefs have made it easier to make in-character decisions in-game or harder?
So I kind of felt like the conversation was going this way, but when you guys asked me to come talk about playing a character who was religious, I started trying to think of how do I play a religious character? And I think it boils it down to a religion is a lens through which your character views the world, interacts with everything. So that if you're having trouble finding a motivation for your character, like for some players, this can make things a lot harder because now you have two layers of other world motivations you have to stack together to figure out. But like it could be a good starting point for you to figure out where your character is coming from if you have like a set of religious beliefs that you can start with, and then from there you can extrapolate their like personal philosophies and their personal views and beliefs on what's happening around them based off of that.
Heck yeah.
Mm.
I mean, that was a really good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you feeling? No pressure, Vivka?
I mean, well, I just feel like Dylan and my like religious characters are so different in some ways. I'm like, are IC decisions easier or harder? I'm like, they're neither. They're just the decisions that my character would absolutely make. It's so ingrained in who my character is that I don't think it makes it easier or harder because there's only what is. I would have made that decision. Like, I don't think about it. Like, it's just, I don't think I answered this very well. Yeah, I feel like, there was only one option to begin with because you're looking through it through that lens.
I think for me playing, when I played a religious character, especially a Catholic religious character, and that's important to note because Catholicism is based, or at least playing a Catholic priest in LARP is based on actual Catholicism, which has its own institution and its own philosophies and all of these things. So playing an actual Catholic priest does make certain things, does make that role play easier because there's already a set of morals and behaviors that I already subscribe to. It's only harder if suddenly I disagree with what the Catholic faith says.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it becomes harder. And then I have to negotiate in my head, why would this person deviate from this set of beliefs? And having met also, having a lot of Catholic relatives, they're not all monolithic in their thinking. Like, for example, I have Catholic relatives who are very liberal, and then I have Catholic relatives who are super conservative. Uh, Also, the Pope just recently acknowledged that gay civil unions exist and they should be respected. That's a huge thing in the 2,000 years of being Catholic to hear. So
Up, Pope.
I know. So those things, if you are playing an established religion, those things are harder if you have to reconcile it. But if you're playing someone who is spiritual, then your spiritual choices are just naturally going to lead the way, and there's no conflict there because there's never going to be any opportunity for conflict because you're not dealing with an institution that you have to be politicking with.
That's good.
Let's see. Oh, I see a note in our chat. Can I show my tome? Yes. If any of my guests have props,
you just read it.
don't worry, it'll be cut out in post.
Actually, I feel like Eric's been waiting for his question for a while, and I would totally love to make sure that we get all of the chat questions first before we.
We make a point of getting that done. But yeah, does anyone mind if I read the question out?
Go for it.
Cool. So one Eric Jackson asks, have you ever run across a situation where other players become offended or otherwise have a bad reaction to in-game religion? Are there steps that you take to prevent or deal with situations like that, if so?
So I feel like I've been fortunate enough to have only played games with fictional religions, so that isn't nearly as much of an issue unless I start trying to bring in out-of-world religion into my roleplay, which is a thing I consciously try to avoid, so... Yeah.
Yeah, very similar. Again, old ways is like, I pray to the big dead bird. It's hard to get angry at that, but in a LARP that I will be doing, Malleus, it's very like Warhammer setting, and so I expect that I will have people in-game offended and in-game upset with my religion because everything is, burning the heretics. Either you're doing the burning or you're the heretic. And they're kind of there for that. But with the question of like, how do you prevent or deal with situations like that? Honestly, the biggest thing with anything in LARP is to just check in. If you get at all a vibe, or even if you're not getting the vibe, just making sure and checking in, being like, throw up whatever hand signal it is that you're out of game and be like, seriously, are you all right? This is just a game. We're good. Like the magical art of a check-in can save so many people's day.
In my case, having played, again, a Catholic priest, it's not so much that people will be offended that I'm playing a Catholic priest. Like that ever rarely happens. What will happen is I think people will use the opportunity to take my position and go, your religion is full of pedophiles. And just say that to my face, expecting a reaction out of me without having discussed it with me. At which point, then it just goes to personal role play and figuring out where is this coming from. Sometimes that's motivated by something that they're going through, at which point that should be discussed out of game. At sometimes people are just doing it to literally be a dick, to try to like
provoke a reaction.
It's a fuck reaction. And so what you kind of do is you kind of have to take it case by case. What are they attacking? Why are they doing so? And also keep in mind that role play that happened like 20 years ago, may not be acceptable now. I still remember a time that if this happened, which happened around like 2003, again, so different from 2020, but if this happened now, people would have their head. I still remember one of the things in Vampire is the Banu Hakim, or the Children of Hakim, which is a whole vampire sect based off of the Arabic regions, like the Muslim religion, and the Muslim religion, and many of them are devout Muslims. I remember very clearly being in a con and straight out calling someone of that religion a darky, just straight out, like out loud, and everyone laughed because that's what ended up happening. Now, some of that laughter was awkward. Some of that laughter was people having to still learn what is appropriate, and the culture is different. But it's something that I think we as players still have to be sensitive to, because we are playing different faiths, that we will not be able to control how people react to it. However, just like Vivka said, it's always important to check in, and it's also important to just call out when that's not okay. Back then, people didn't really have the tools that we have now to be able to check in or say that that's not okay. We do now, and that's why we have podcasts like the way we do, because it's important to emphasize that a game is a game until it is not.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, 110%. You should always kind of in the back. I mean, we've always on Life Action Roleplay specified that if the only justification for you doing something is it's what my character would do, and that action is actively like problematic, then it is no excuse. If you think something is going to be problematic, then you should either check the temperature of your fellow players and like read the room, or you should just not do it. Unless you're playing one of those LARPs where they have been very, very clear from the start, hey, practically anything goes. Like if it's not on this short list, you can do it, you can say it. If you're playing one of those games, then everyone is aware there's that social contract ahead of time. But pay attention to the social contract of the game. Because if you start pulling something that people have not really consented to, then you are the asshole. That is it. How are we doing on time? I know we're getting there, but there's a couple of things I'd like to kind of machine gun out.
Yeah, sure.
Is there anything else anyone would like to mention?
I think we're at the time where I think maybe one piece of advice from everyone here on playing a faith-based character would be good. Like, I like the machine gun idea.
Okay. I have two things that I'd like to do. So I'm going to do one now and I'll do one at the end. First one, it kind of touches upon what Eric asked us a little earlier. I think it is incredibly important that if you are playing a faith-based character, you need to know where your faith lies on some kind of alignment spectrum. You need to know. Whoa, that was a noise. Wow. Okay, I'm going to start again. You need to know where your faith lands on the alignment kind of spectrum. If you've got a lawful good, like Spanish Inquisition kind of thing, well, that's not really lawful good. As you can see, there's a lot of variety to this. Either way, you need to think about the general kind of statement of, is my faith an antagonistic faith? Is my faith a bad guy faith, or is it a good guy faith? Yes, there are always going to be, well, I'm the good guy of my own story. Sure, characters think that. Players should not. You have to be alert to that. So be aware if and where your character's faith might be problematic, so you can carefully navigate that around other players and be thoughtful about that. In addition, if you are playing some kind of, more antagonistic bad guy faith, then you should definitely really seriously consider how people around you want to play. You need to get their consent if you're going to want to try and burn someone as a heretic, unless that is actually part of the system and that is intentionally something that people have consented to. So having a good feel for where your character stands in that antagonism kind of value is important. And then from there, you should always understand that playing a bad guy, you should never be playing to win. You should be playing to play good story. So if you're playing a bad guy religious zealot, then you should be playing to lose. You should be playing to push characters and challenge them in ways that provoke good story and interesting character development. Likewise, if you're a good faith character, then you should be trying to nurture and encourage the same kind of changes and things, but from the other side. Thank you for my TED Talk.
I would say that my piece of advice is if you are afraid of playing a faith-based character because you are afraid you don't know enough of the tenets of an actual religion to be able to play it, do not let that stop you. Feel free to beg, borrow, and steal, and incorporate as much as you can, as long as you do enough research. You don't have to know all the doctrines. I wouldn't expect anyone to, but do you at least know the basic senses of, do you at least know that they go to church on Sundays, and be able to play with that. The thing I would also encourage and be watchful for is if you yourself maybe follow that faith in real life, and someone is role playing that as a LARP character, and they may not necessarily know that, please do not browbeat someone with your faith because they don't know particular tenets, because A, that's not fun, and B, that's not the intent. If you do it to just enhance discussion and just ask, have you considered this point of view, that's different. You're now discussing on a common ground, but don't play literally holier than thou because you can quote a thing from the Bible and someone else can't. That's not, again, that's not fun. It's really a strange form of rules lawyering that that I have actually seen, and it's not. Ultimately, people end up getting weirdly resentful because now you've done two things: you've alienated the person who was trying to play a character of faith rather than having a teaching opportunity, and B, now you look like a jerk for trying to go, well, this is all the correct things. You know what? Sometimes in the world of darkness or in this alternative world, sometimes things take a different turn. And you have to be open to that when dealing with people who are playing the spiritual.
Don't actually religion.
Yeah. Ryan, is that something that you've personally been on the receiving end, or is this something that you've seen at a game happen and play out around you?
I'm a Catholic. I was baptized Catholic. I don't really practice that, but but for me to so it's kind of difficult for me to know all of the all of the liturgy or all of the apocrypha or all of the things that a Catholic priest would know. I am encouraged by the fact that I have a friend who is a friend, Brian, who is an actual Episcopalian priest. He wears the garb and everything, and he is an actual LARPer. And the thing is, he has never persuaded anyone by citing all the tenets of being Episcopalian or Catholic in order to convert anyone. He's basically just done it by being charismatic and being able to role play and listen to the concerns, as one good vampire who eventually became a prince does. Like he ended up addressing their faith, but also just being a badass at being a vampire. But he didn't do it by saying, I know all the rules the best. You can know all the rules the best for for playing any game, but that doesn't make you a person who can role play well with others.
Very true.
Yeah,
Ryan,
you're not playing an encyclopedia. You're playing a guy who believes in things.
Absolutely.
Bingo. I love that.
With that in mind, if you're having trouble remembering things, I personally have a shit memory when it comes to reciting things and stuff like that. I mean, holy books exist for a reason. Do not feel afraid to create a prop that helps you play your character. That's the whole point of swords. That's the whole point of spell packets. It's the whole point of all of that thing. And both of our guests are holding up holy books right now. It's perfect. I love it.
Oh, please talk about your holy books. This looks amazing.
If you guys would be willing, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, Dylan, like, what is the book that you just held up? Because that was so cool.
So this was just the book I found to write all my sermons in, because I am a lot more eloquent written than speaking off the top of my head. So this was very much a necessity for me, but also like I took the opportunity to deck it out, make it a holy book. I've got my tenets written on the inside. It's written in pencil, so you can't actually see it on the screen, but yeah.
They're really there. It's just invisible ink.
Yes. Only the faithful can read. I don't know.
Well,
on Saturday mornings.
And Vivka, your book?
Oh my god.
Okay, so my book, before you were going to say what kind of advice we can give, and my bit of advice honestly is props. Oh my gosh. Being, just like Kai said, having like a book or a totem or something that you have on you can be such an easy like conversation focal point. It can be something that you can focus on to help spurn inspiration. It's something that you can just, it's just, props are just so handy and so needed. And so with my Malleus character, Mercy, like I said, she is a sister superior of the Order of the Bleeding Rose. And the whole LARP is, like I said before, kind of like a Warhammer type thing, only instead of Sigmar, it's Solcon. And I tied all that together and I was like, well, I feel like she would have a book. And then COVID hit. So I was like, well, I got the time. So I decided to start making essentially the holy tome of the order. It doesn't have a cover yet. Don't judge me on this. I'm going to make a leather cover for it. But my whole thought process behind this was that this book was passed down from sister superior to sister superior, and each one starts filling it out. So I started going through and making drawings and everything, the reward for tolerance is treachery. And I have like quite a few pages, and then as you go into it, they start looking a little bit different. And I like to think of those as like the different sisters who added stuff, lots of roses, because it's like the Order of the Bleeding Rose. I started making these long cloth pieces that have angry rambles on them that I'm going to be using as like bookmarks. I've been collecting like little bits and bobs that look like they could be religious emblems. And I want to also include pages that have some pictures of the different sisters that have fallen. This is Sister Temperance Mariana de la Martilla. And my favorite part about this book, other than the fact that I have been anointing it with rose oil, so it smells incredible. But when you're building props like this, a great thing with LARP is that it kind of helps you tell a story. So like I'm getting this all yucky and stained and everything, and I thought you know, it would be neat if I added some blood splatter to it. So I started actually putting blood all over my hands, because this is the book that's used in battle. So I figure, you know, they would actively be kind of messy. So I started putting like red paint on my hands and flipping through the pages, because if somebody has blood on their hands and they're trying to find like the right essentially sermon and spell that'll help, it's going to get all over. And so I started adding more and more little fingerprints towards the edges, and I realized that there should be definitely one page where all the blood stops, and this is going to be a page that I'm going to put a very noble sister that got slain as she was flipping through the book. And this is just something that I came up with while I was like making this all dirty. That's going to be so satisfying to me, flipping through and reading this book and being able to tell someone about that sister. This, when you build props like this for religion, it becomes part of the history of the religion that you actually get to hold and share. It turns the religion into something more than just like this thing that you're talking about, into a solidified piece that you get to hold on to and share with people. And that is why props are important. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Woo. Dylan, it looks like we're having some video issues with you right now. I think I hear some noise.
Yeah, I'm still here. My internet cut out for a minute, and now I got to reset my camera. Oh, here we are.
Oh,
Hello.
wow. Sideways. Amazing. Perfect.
Nice.
Right, what were we talking about?
I was
I-
showing off my book. It was cool, and I'm done.
Yeah, I think
It's a very cool book.
I think we're now to you on a piece of advice to give
Mhm.
to people who would like to play the faithful.
Generally, the way I approach it is just be that freaking nerd who thinks way too much about it. Because if you really deep down, even if you don't really believe in the stuff that you're role playing around, if you think hard enough, you can make some pretty profound spiritual, like, what's the
Statements?
word?
Connections?
Connections, metaphors about,
Revelations?
yeah.
Oh, nice, Kai.
But also, yes, props are a darn good time. Props really help build the significant feeling if you have any kind of religious roleplay you want to do. I've got my anointed powders here that I use to perform baptisms. It's glitter, but it's just in the mythos
some of
of
that Disney magic.
Yeah, in the mythos of the telling visions Disney faith, it is the hallowed pixie dust passed down by the holy fae angels, and like it's used to perform all these anointments.
Oh,
And then
Tinkerbell.
Thinker.
yeah, and then also within that mythos, I have a meta level to that where even within the game, it's just worthless glitter. But Walter knows that like if you tell someone the magic feather helps you fly, then it helps them learn to fly on their own.
So good.
So really, just put way more thought into it than you think you need to, and you'll come up with something convincingly religious.
Dylan, would you mind sharing the relevance of the dish of a certain foodstuff that you hand out at your sermons? Remember the Saturday morning to our viewers, Saturday morning cartoons. Dylan hands out a certain thing with it.
Yeah, so I like to. The original idea was just sugary cereal, if not just a straight up bowl of sugar, because like we don't know what Captain Crunch is 300 years in the future. But I typically do basically a communion or a cakes and ale of just Coke and popcorn. I've got this whole blessing that I bestow upon everything, but it's soda and popcorn, and it's just
so good.
Lobby refreshments, but it's like this big hallowed thing.
I remember
I
one
think-
time having communion with milk duds. It was awesome.
Oh,
Mm.
amazing.
When I do my my initiations, like I said, I actually bring jelly bellies, and I'm like, so this is a berry that I get from Paradox. So this is like, and I was doing it to my own friend. I was like, so these berries will take you to a whole different realm. And oh God, not tutti frutti. Nobody gets tutti frutti. That's awful. All right, so now I'm going to give. And she like lost it, and like she was just like, Tutti Frutti is the worst. Thank you. Nobody likes Tutti Frutti.
I know that it's very much intended a joke of like, come to the dark side, we have cookies. But honestly, baked goods are a very good way of getting LARPers to follow a faith.
I've seen it.
Yep.
I've seen it. It works.
May you never hunger, for refreshments are available in the lobby. And may you never thirst, but please remember to dispose of all trash in specified containers, conveniently located at the sanctuary exits.
So good.
Meanwhile, behind you, just let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. I'm
So-
not part of this world. Never mind. Goodbye.
So to wrap up, I said I had two ones. We are quite a bit over time, so I'll make this very, very brief. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, there is no such thing as a lone wolf faith character. It just doesn't work. In LARP in general, if you try to be a badass lone wolf like the movies, it doesn't work because you're not having fun, because it entirely requires social interaction to have fun. Unless you really enjoy narrating to yourself as you're walking around in the dark, which I'm not gonna yuck someone's yum. However, when you're doing a faith, you should definitely work out ways to involve people. Getting an audience like Dylan has kind of described, and having the communion aspect where you're handing around things. That is a physical prop that is being handed around from person to person. Granted, now that COVID is a thing, I think